Happy Thursday. Welcome back to the Wolff Den presented by Win Again Academy. I'm Matt Wolff, founder and CEO of Ticket Time Machine. Today, our guest is Bob Burg. Welcome to the Wolff Den. How are you?
I'm great, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, excited to have you on here. But for those in the audience who don't know who you are, give a quick introduction and then we'll get into everything.
Author, speaker, co-authored a book called The Go-Giver with John David Mann. And gosh, that's pretty much it. I actually never realized how shallow a person I am. That's my entire bio.
I think that's short bio is good. It's a powerful bio. I got introduced to you by Brandon Eastman, I believe, who told me about your book. I think you were on his show as well.
Brandon's
I
great.
bought the book, read it, and I thought it was great. First thing that comes to mind to me, Who Moved My Cheese? And then I also just got these stamps. You know what that is?
No, I don't think so.
Silverstein, The Giving Tree.
Oh, right.
So those two books come to mind. Have you heard that before? Is that fair? Comparison. Not that they're in the same kind of ilk.
That they're parables, sure.
Yeah. What gave you the idea for The Go-Giver? I see a lot of books like this, and I read it, and to me, a lot of it kind of feels like, I don't mean this in a bad way, it feels like common sense. It feels like, hey, we've heard this before. Absolutely. Right? But it's like, how do you bring this message is what counts.
Yeah. So the idea for the book originally was back in the 90s. I had a book called Endless Referrals, Network Your Everyday Contacts into Sales, which was a how-to book for salespeople and entrepreneurs who really believed in their work and their business and their product or service. They knew they brought great value, but they didn't necessarily feel comfortable or confident in going out into their local communities and building relationships with people that would lead to new business, both directly and through referrals, right? So that was the idea of Endless Referrals. It was based on a premise that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. I had the idea that I'd love to turn that basic idea into a parable because I'd always enjoyed reading parables. And, certainly Dr. Johnson's Who Moved My Cheese, I thought that was a great parable. But he also, remember, he teamed up with Dr. Kenneth Blanchard back in the late 70s, early 80s. They wrote a whole bunch of the 1 minute parables, 1 minute manager, 1 minute salesperson, 1 minute apology. And whenever I'd read parables throughout the years, I always enjoyed them. I always felt a real good connection with them. I think stories connect on a deeper level. And so I thought, how could we take that basic premise of Endless Referrals and move it into a parable? So in coming up with the title, I just asked myself, basically, what is the basic essence of those entrepreneurs and salespeople who could very quickly and sustainably create those know, like, and trust relationships? And it's that they're givers. They give value to others. That's their focus. So fortunately, I knew this guy named John David Mann, who was the editor-in-chief of a magazine I was writing for. And he's a fantastic writer. I'm a how-to guy. I'm step 1, step 2, step 3. I could never have done something like this on my own, but John could. And fortunately, he got the the essence of it, and he was the lead writer and storyteller. That's really how it came about. I agree with you that there's nothing new. In fact, when the book first came out, and it kind of took off early, it had some early success, and we were asked by people, so what is this that the two of you have put together that's anything new? And I would always say nothing. Nothing's new. Successful people have utilized these 5 laws or principles since time immemorial. Now, many of them did it intuitively. They didn't even know that's what they were doing, but that's what they did. And so we simply took it and maybe put our own terms to the different principles and told it in story form. Again, thanks to John's great writing, but that's really all it is.
The principles, I live by the golden rule. That's big to me. And a lot of people talk about karma. Is that intertwined with what your story is?
Nah, I don't really see it that way, only because karma tends to be looked at as and not that I don't believe in karma, I mean, what goes around comes around, and all these different, and a lot of times it does, but that's not really what this is about. There's nothing. I think karma is sort of that more universal in nature, big picture, macro type of thing. No, this is really, when we say that the premise of the Go Giver is that shifting your focus off of yourself and onto others. Okay, focusing on giving immense value to others is not only a more fulfilling way of conducting business, it's the most financially profitable way as well. There's no kind of, esoteric, type of thing we're talking about. It's very logical. It's very rational. Matt, when you're that person who can move your focus off yourself, move from an I focus or me focus to an other focus, right? Looking to serve others, discovering what other people need, want, and desire, looking to help people solve their challenges, helping people move closer to happiness, if you will. Well, when you do that, when you live that way, when you conduct business and life that way, people feel good about you. People want to get to know you. They like you. They trust you. They want to be in relationship with you. They want to do business with you. They want to tell others about you. So it's actually very rational as to why this works.
But I think as time has gone on and networking has evolved, social media, a lot of people are doing this because they think that's the right thing to do, not because they want to do it. There's a lot of virtue signaling out there, a lot of look at me,
Mhm.
look what I'm doing. Does that matter?
I guess depending on how it's, let me ask you just to make sure I'm answering the right question. In what context are you talking about what when you say what they're doing?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, if we're networking, whether it's on LinkedIn or it's elsewhere, we have an agenda, and that's okay to have an agenda, as you know. But what you're doing is everyone knows you got to like, know, and trust, and everyone knows you got to give value, and you should start. Hey, how can I help you? So that's what they do, but it's kind of like just going through the motions.
If that's what it is, it's not real sustainable. I think, bless you, and I think most people can tell. I think especially because online, it's easier to really find out who the real person is because you can only keep up a facade for so long. Well, some people can do it, right? But not many. It's pretty tough. And so I think those people who authentically want to serve others, those, and by the way, just because you're building a business through doing it, just because you're earning a profit, that doesn't take away from the immense value that you're legitimately providing another human being. So often we see this, this what we call treacherous dichotomy or false dilemma, the unnecessary use of the word or, right? And it could come right back to, are you a giver or a receiver? Well, I think that's the wrong question, uh, because the answer to it is yes, you're a giver and a receiver. Now, your focus is on the giving. Your focus is, hey, this is universal law. This is natural law. These are laws of nature. We plant before we harvest, right? We sow before we reap. Early in the story, you might recall Pindar, the main mentor, said to Joe, some people approach a fireplace with the attitude of, first you give me some fire and some heat, then I'll throw on some logs and some wood and some newspaper and light a match. It's not how life works. It's not how business works. Can you imagine going into a bank and saying, hey, I want to open up an account here, but first you give me an interest payment and then I'll make a deposit? Life doesn't work that way, and successful people deal in truths, right? And so, no, we give value before we can ever expect to receive. John and I say money is an echo of value. It's the thunder to values lightning. So you do both, but you focus on the giving, and to the degree that you do it genuinely with a true giver's heart and wanting to help another human being, that comes through, and that's going to come back to you.
Yeah, I thought it's interesting when I'm reading this book because I'm pretty good at seeing my faults and what I'm good at. I believe I'm a giver, but I also believe that I am a taker, receiver. And growing up, I was probably more taking than giving, and over time, felt, look, I have ways to help. I want to do it however I can, and because I feel like I'm willing to give, I don't. I don't hesitate to ask. And there's some scenarios where you can go in to ask, right? I mean, there's this time. I mean, you can't always just be giving. There's times to
Exactly.
ask and take.
And that's not anything that we say, or you know what I'm saying? And I think some people, they see the title of the book and they say, "Oh, that's what this is about. Just selflessly give yourself away and be set." No, first of all, there's nothing about being a go-giver that should ever be misconstrued as being a doormat or a martyr or self sacrificial in any way. Absolutely not. It's simply understanding that to the degree that you genuinely look to provide value to others, that's the degree that you are creating those know, like, and trust relationships. It's the degree to which you are creating that benevolent context for success. And of course you can ask. We need to ask a lot of times. So no, there's nothing wrong. Now, I would say, when you said that you were more of a taker or a receiver, I would say there's a difference between the two. We always say there's three types. Because people say, well, is the opposite of go giver a go getter? Absolutely not. We love go getters because a go getter takes action. And this, it's you can have the greatest ideas, best thoughts, nicest intent, but unless action's put into the mix, nothing's going to happen. So we love go-getters. We like to tell people be go-getters and people of action, and go-givers, people who are absolutely laser focused on providing value to others. Just don't be a go-taker. Why? Because a go-taker is that person who feels almost entitled, if you will, to take without adding value to the person, to the process, to the situation. And so that's really the difference between, between those.
What do you say to those who see people out there who are go takers, who aren't giving, who are narcissistic and selfish, whatever, and they're
Um,
successful? Because there's a
success-
lot of them out there.
Absolutely. It's a big world. And there's many ways to be successful financially. Okay. And so what happens is this: with a go taker, someone who's just truly focused just on themselves, a couple of different things have to happen. One is that go taker might have some sort of real immense talent, and that talent brings great value to the marketplace. So despite the fact that they don't really necessarily care about the marketplace, they care about themselves, what they do brings value. So they're able to make a really good income. Or I should say, there are people who just work really hard, really consistently, okay? And they do what it takes to, for the sale to take place, but it's very difficult for them to sustain this. Now, sometimes they do sustain it because sometimes people are just able to do that. It's who they are. It's what they do. But it's tougher. It's a lot tougher to earn a lot of money as a go taker than it is as a go giver. Why? Because remember, and I say this when I speak at pretty much every sales conference that I speak at, nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet.
Yeah.
Okay. They're not going to buy from you because you need the money or want the money. And they're not even going to buy from you just because you're a really nice person. They're going to buy from you because they believe that they will be better off by doing so than by not doing so. So even a go taker, assuming they're not doing something illegal, okay, assuming they're making their money honestly, they still have to add value to others. It's just that that's not their intent. They don't care to do that. It's just what they have to do because in a free market, which we basically live in, people don't have to buy from you. So they have to find value in doing so. But usually a go taker, aside from the fact that it's a lot tougher to get wealthy that way, their personal lives are usually just not very good. They don't have great relationships and so forth. I don't mean to laugh. I'm not glad, but
No,
I'm just saying that's typically how it is. So I would suggest people be a combination of go getter and go giver as opposed to go taker.
and one of the great things about the book and just in general is that giving is contagious.
Mm,
The pay it forward, right? Someone bought my coffee, I'm going to buy the next person's coffee in line.
that's a
Um,
great
I,
example. Yeah.
and what I and one of the reasons that why I feel like I'm so willing to give what I am willing to do is because I'm very fortunate to sit where I am right now, very privileged, whatever word you want to use it. I got a lot of help along the way to get here. I still have a long way to go. That's why I still need a lot of help. But I understand that I didn't get here without all these people helping me. And so it's a little frustrating to see people who are sort of at the top, higher up, not willing to give back a little bit. Those are two things that I see. It's contagious, and then some people kind of get to this spot and they sort of forget the old adage, remember where you came from.
Well, some people, unfortunately, their ego takes over, and that happens. So sometimes those lessons are learned very painfully. Other times, people seem to skate by, and it's not. So I think all we can do is our best to add value to the world as is congruent with our values, and
I think,
work that way.
yeah, and I think with values, it's like, man, today it's a little bit different. There's a blur between what's right and wrong when certain things should never. It's pretty obvious things are either right or wrong, but somehow there's a lot of stuff that has become sort of gray area. I don't know how. Certain things we should do in the giving realm because it's the right thing to do. And I guess some of that has to do with how you're being brought up. Where do you think people find their giving from? Is it how I was brought up? Is it seeing others like a pay it forward? Um,
Well, I think it's a combination of such. I mean, I think if you were brought up in an environment where your parents held giving, let's say, charity and doing for others and community involvement and so forth, I think if you see that as a family value, remember, we tend to grow up and take on the beliefs, right? Take on the basic beliefs, principles, values, and so forth of our family. And so I think that has a lot to do with it. By the same token, someone can come across someone as they're growing up and have their lives touched by somebody who sets a great example that maybe they didn't have, you know. Or somebody gets a little older and gets into business and they do things one certain way, but then they come across some people who they see as being very successful, very happy, very, well, in harmony, and they kind of take that on. So, I mean, I think there's different reasons, and I think we can all be an example uh, to someone. I mean, I was very fortunate in having great parents and getting to see their example and so forth. Um, so, yeah, I mean, I think it's different for different people.
if you're not giving, are you a bad person? Is
Well,
you look at
first,
people like that as bad people who just never give?
I think we always have to go back to what we mean by giving, because in a business sense, okay, and so for the purpose of the book, let's say, we're talking more in the business sense in terms of giving value in the daily process of life. Okay. Um, when it comes to giving in terms of charity, I hope that's a high value for people and that people give according to their values, where they want to see their money go and where they, who they want to support, what they want to support. But I think if someone doesn't, I wouldn't judge someone as being a bad person, because my feeling is they're doing what they're doing based on their belief system, that combination of upbringing and environment and schooling and media and movies and everything that comes into a person's life that touches them in a certain way. But would I hope that they're kind and giving and charitable? Sure, but I can't say they're not a good person if they don't, because I probably don't know them well enough to
Yeah.
make that kind of
I
judgment.
mean, like even if as you're reading the book, and a lot of these stories, parables, lessons can be used for all sorts of
Yeah.
situations and like not just business. Obviously, it's a
Oh,
great way to go
absolutely.
through business. It's just interesting to see the people who are the givers, and I guess that's all subjective, right? What makes someone a bad person? Certainly, there are certain things that we would look upon as behavior that's would make someone a bad person.
Sure.
But these are great lessons in life for people not even in business. It doesn't have to be a business to follow these principles.
I agree. And and that's why we put in that part, the kind of subplot about Joe and Susan. And because we just wanted to make the point that, yeah, it is a business book, it's a business story, the publisher is a business publisher, and yet universal laws and principles tend to work across the board. So whether we're talking about, success as it relates, to financial, physical, spiritual, mental, emotional, social, relational, what have you. If you're following principles that are sound and proven, then yeah, it's pretty much going to apply to all areas.
Well, what do you say to the person who is a giver and they're not the receiving opportunities or have been few and far between?
Yeah. So if someone is, let's say, they feel as though they're putting the 5 laws into practice. Okay, the laws being the laws of value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity. And they say, "Oh, but I'm doing this, and I'm giving, and I'm giving this, and giving that, and I'm not receiving." You know, I would ask some questions, and the first question I would ask is, when you say you're giving or you're giving value to others, how do you mean that? What exactly are you doing? And we'll usually find that they're doing things that, yeah, they're saying are giving value, but it isn't necessarily of value to the other person. So first, let's look at what do we even mean by value? Well, the definition of value is the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something, to the end user or beholder. In other words, what is it about this thing, whether it's a product, service, concept, idea, philosophy, information, advice, whatever, that other person feels to be worthwhile. In other words, value is always in the eyes of the beholder. So this person who believes they're giving value is probably giving value as they feel it's of value, or as they think someone else should think it's of value, but they're not necessarily taking the time in discovering what's of value to that other person. Okay, that's the first thing, and that's usually right there is what we find, and the person will usually say, "Well, yeah, that's true. I'm just kind of doing this and that and thinking, well, they should, right?" Um, and then, the other thing too is it's not that it takes a long time for this to work. Like, it's shorter than doing it the other way. Being a go-giver takes a shorter time to be successful than being a go-taker because, again, people aren't doing it for your reasons; they're doing it for theirs. But 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 that doesn't mean that it is instantaneous either. And so sometimes we can't try something for 3 days and then complain that it doesn't work. But there's one other aspect too, and that is the receiving part. And this is something that so many people find so very difficult because it's sort of baked in to our society, the anti-prosperity messages uh, that come about on a constant, consistent daily basis. I mean, if you were to read the newspapers, I actually shouldn't use that as an example since those hardly exist anymore. But if you read online stuff, if you go on Twitter, if you watch political ads, if you are in discussions with people, I mean, you would think that anybody who makes a lot of money has done something, evil, or has done it through nefarious means, or has done it on the backs of those. Well, that first of all, again, there's people who do things in ways that we don't like. But for 95% or more of the people out there who are making a great living, it's only because they were able to provide value to someone that someone paid for.
Do you
Right.
you believe that number is that high?
Of what? Of the people
People
who.
doing it the right way, or
It's
the
not a
right way?
matter of the it's not even a matter of the right way of intent, okay? It's the fact that in a market-based economy, okay, nobody is forced to buy from you.
Correct.
So the only ones that can force people to buy are those who let's say have who are acting as cronyists who buy special interest or favors, through their legislators, and they have special rules and regulations made so that they can have, the advantage. Okay, those people are not doing it the go giver way, but
No.
for the person who is the entrepreneur, the small business owner, or it doesn't have to be small business, it could be what have you. They have got to find people who will benefit from their product or service. It's the only way because, again, no one's forced to do business with you.
Right.
So yeah, 95% of the people who make a lot of money do it in a way that they're doing it without force or fraud. And they're simply providing a great product or service, and they're touching the lives of a lot of people with that great product or service. Now, by the way, that 95% number is not from a double blind study or
No,
anything.
no,
And there's
we
a
always
slide,
say
and
60.
there's a continuum. Not everybody's as honest as we would like people to be, but by and large, I mean, most people are just going out there trying to find a way to bring value to others' lives, even if it's just for the very purpose of earning income themselves. And that's okay.
As I say on the back of my thermal tickets, research tells us that 42% of all statistics are made up.
Made up, right?
I do think that number. I do think that number is low. That's probably for another discussion.
I think
Um,
that probably is too.
yeah. What or number is high?
No, I was going to say the 42% is low.
Oh, no, I think the 42% is low.
I
The
think a whole lot more
95% is
statistics are
high.
made up.
There's that game show that you put it in between. What percent of people? Speaking of percents, if you just had to guess, what percent of people do you think have a pretty good grasp on where they're at as a giver? Do they think they give more than they do, or less?
I think probably isn't there that thing about the 80% of people think they're above average drivers?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
which of course
right.
can't be, right?
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah, I think we tend to judge ourselves favorably, and by our intent, and others by their actions. So
yeah. Well, you do a lot of speaking. You wrote the book. You do a lot of speaking. Um, if people wrote the book, what do you speak about?
oh, in as far as what,
But
Matt?
people, what are you speaking about? Let's say if I read the book and I come to hear you speak,
Oh,
what am I going to get?
I go much deeper into the five laws. And I also talk a lot about how to cultivate new business. I talk a lot about building a referral based business. And also, I go much deeper into even the law of influence, and talk about that as it relates to people's skills.
Did you have a business before you wrote the book?
Um, well, I mean, first of all, this book wasn't my first book. So I'd been in business for quite a while as a speaker since the early 90s.
Okay.
My first book was Endless Referrals. So, but before I went into business as a speaker, I was just a good salesperson, and then wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I set up a business that was basically teaching the referral marketing methods that I had learned and prospered by, and it kind of grew from there.
Yeah, I think there's no playbook in sales. There's so many people trying to pitch a playbook. I think if you're going to follow a guide, the Go Giver is a great guide to follow.
Thank you.
But who knows? You got to have. There's a lot of other factors that are involved with it to become, a successful, not a
Sure.
successful salesperson, but just a product, a business, a service, whatever
Mhm.
that might be. But for all the people who are trying to sell, what's your feeling on these people who try and sell these sales playbooks? And I think a lot of them are gimmicks where this just
It
sort of
it
feels like
it
the
just
way to go.
it just depends, Matt. There's people who for years have sold fantastic sales methodology systems and so forth, and there's others who are charlatans.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think you got to look at it as on an individual basis, but understand that there are certain principles involved. And if it's a person who is giving you a quick fix for success, it probably is not true, right? If you see somebody who's teaching basic principles of success, who are teaching, who are, well, I mean, it sounds like I'm talking about myself, and I don't mean to, but I mean, if you go back to whether it's Tom Hopkins, Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, people like Jeffrey Gitomer, people like Phil Jones, and people who are, who have great information, great materials. I that is all about serving another human being. And
Yeah.
sales at its best, because so many people think that selling is about trying to convince someone to buy something they don't want or need, and that's not selling. That's called being a con artist. Okay.
Yeah.
Selling, by its very nature, by definition, is simply discovering what the other person does need, want, or desire, and helping them to get it.
Yeah.
That is selling, right? And and that's why, to the degree that we help other people, that's the degree that we are very successful ourselves.
And everybody's selling every day, whether you're in
Well,
sales or not. in some
selling it,
form or fashion.
you're transferring an idea. It's part of life. I mean, life advances through persuasion, right? I mean, it's you look at Steve Jobs and the tools that he invented that has provided so much benefit to humankind, excuse me. And you look at that and you say, he had to sell that idea. People weren't asking, for an iPhone that did the things, or the iPad, or the what was the first one that he had, the music iPod, or any of those things. They weren't asking for that. He came up with it and had to sell people on the idea. He did it on a macro level, of course. It's still sales.
Yeah. What's the best? You got a lot of books back there. You have a favorite book or something you recommend that others read?
There's a lot of them that I just think are fantastic books that I've learned so much from.
You just pick one or two, or whatever comes to your mind, or whatever you see first.
I think this book that was written by Harry Brown, it was actually, he wrote this back in the 60s, not meaning it for it to be published. It was only the two.
Got to push it up a little bit so we can see.
So it's called The Secret of Selling Anything. But really what it's about, and by the way, his secret is find out what the other person wants and help them get it. But there's a lot more to the book. It's actually an absolutely beautiful teaching on understanding and respecting human nature, and then tying that to the sales process. On my website at burg.com/blog, if you put in The Secret of Selling in the search, you'll see a review I did on the book. To me, and it was, again, he wrote it in the 60s, so it's 60s language and everything. So that's outdated, but the principles are absolutely, in fact, I would say this is the book. And people say, Bob, if there was one book that, you'd give an 18-year-old, well, of course, there's not one book, there's many books. But if there was one book that would help a person to navigate life successfully, this would be the one book. So yeah, if you go to burg.com/blog and then just put in The Secret to Selling, it should come up the article that I wrote on this. And I think it's just a fantastic book.
It's bobburg.com.
Burg.com. B-U-R-G.
Burg.com.
.com.
We got a couple, one more question, and then we'll let you out of the Wolff Den. Well, one that we let. But what's the best or coolest place that your speaking has taken you to?
Gosh, I've been doing this for 30 plus years. I've gone to so many great places, but the best place I just love to be is Jupiter, Florida.
You're right. You're up, I was at a Hammerheads game the other day. They've really built Jupiter up. Really great. Great place to go. Great place to be. Really appreciate your time here. I love the book. I encourage anyone to read it. It's The Go-Giver by Bob Burg. And then obviously if you go to burg.com, book him to speak, you can find out more about The Secret of Selling Anything by Harry Brown, which Bob recommends. We're going to let you out of the Wolff Den with the same question we let everyone go with.
Okay.
You can spend a day with anyone in the world, 24 hours. They have to be alive, and you can't be related to them. Who would you choose, and what would you guys do?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. So who would it be?
What would you like to do?
Well, it would be someone who I would just want to be in conversation with. We wouldn't have to do anything because, I don't really need to do things. I would just, if there's someone who I can be in a conversation with who would
that be? They got to be alive, remember.
Yeah, I know. Gosh, that's a great question. I wish I was prepared for that one, because I would have loved to come up with somebody. Yeah, I would have loved to come up with someone who
comes to your head.
Later, I'm not going to say, oh, right, something. I just think you got me stumped on this. I cannot come up with one person, because it's almost like saying, it's like saying, who's the one person you would like to spend? and I can't come up and think with someone.
I got a ton that I would do.
Well, name someone. Name a few.
Oh, Obama is for one. A lot of people pick a presidents. They pick people like Warren Buffett or you know uh, Bill Gates and stuff like that. Intellectuals, musicians, artists, entertainers, all different types of you know philanthropists. They've all been. I got to go back and go. I think Obama is number one. We've had 230 episodes, and I think he's number one. I got to go back and look at the list. We had someone mention Putin, which obviously we can't make happen, but just interested to see what the mind of someone like that is to talk to someone. Um, yeah,
Gosh, so wish I could come up with somebody, and
You'll come back to it. You'll
like,
come back to me later whenever it hits you. But again, really appreciate the time. I think sometimes the best message is either a simple message, something we've already heard, something we know about, but it takes someone to take that all together and put it in the right form for it to make an impact. And I think that's what you've done with the Go Giver.
wow.
So check out the book, and great chatting with you. And we look forward to doing it again sometime.
Well, thank you so much. I just so appreciate you. Love the work you're doing, and this was a lot of fun. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Bob. Have a good one.